Picture this: Manhattan's Upper East Side, where glass towers scrape the clouds and every doorman knows the price of your shoes before you even walk in. It's 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and the city's pace is starting to slow, but not for everyone. Not for Maria Gonzalez, who's been on her feet for 12 hours straight, delivering food to people who probably spend more on lunch than she spends in a week. Maria's 24 years old, with tired eyes that still sparkle with determination. Her delivery uniform, a red polo shirt from Quick Bite Delivery and black jeans that have seen better days, is wrinkled from the humidity and stained with the evidence of a long shift. Her dark hair is pulled back in a messy ponytail, with a few strands escaping to frame her exhausted but beautiful face. She's carrying a thermal bag in one hand and a coffee cup in the other, her worn-out sneakers making soft squeaking sounds against the marble floor of the most expensive building she's ever stepped foot in. This isn't just any delivery. This is the penthouse of the Meridian Tower, where apartments start at $8 million and go up from there. Maria's been doing this job for 2 years, ever since she moved to New York from Phoenix to support her younger brother's medical school tuition. She's seen wealth before, but nothing like this. The lobby alone probably costs more than her entire apartment building. The elevator ride to the 50th floor feels like an eternity. Maria catches her reflection in the polished steel doors and quickly looks away. She knows she looks tired. She knows her uniform isn't pressed. She knows she doesn't belong here. But she also knows that this delivery, a simple black coffee and a Caesar salad, represents $43 in tips if she's lucky, and that's gas money for the rest of the week. The elevator dings softly, and the doors open to reveal a private hallway with only one door: the penthouse. Maria takes a deep breath, straightens her shoulders, and walks toward the entrance. Her heart is beating a little faster than usual, not from the elevator ride, but from the weight of being somewhere so far removed from her world. She rings the doorbell, and after a moment that feels like forever, the door opens. Standing before her is a man who looks like he's stepped out of a magazine. James Alexander Whitmore III, though Maria doesn't know his name yet, is 31 years old, with perfectly styled dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He's wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit that probably costs more than Maria's annual rent, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie that catches the hallway light just right. His watch, a Patek Philippe that his grandfather left him, gleams on his wrist like a small constellation. But here's what Maria notices first. He looks surprised to see her. Not annoyed, not impatient like most of her customers. Surprised, as if he wasn't expecting anyone at all. I have your order," Maria says, her voice smaller than she intended. She holds up the thermal bag with one hand while balancing the coffee cup in the other. "Black coffee and Caesar salad from Romano's?" James stares at her for a moment, and Maria can see confusion flickering across his features. His brow furrows slightly, creating small lines that somehow make him look more human, less like the untouchable figure she expected. "I didn't order anything," he says softly, but not unkindly. His voice carries the educated accent of someone who went to boarding school and Ivy League universities, but there's something gentle in his tone that catches Maria off guard. Maria's heart sinks. This happens sometimes. Wrong addresses, canceled orders, customers who forget they placed an order while drunk or distracted. But usually she can just take the food back and eat the small loss. This time, though, she's on the 50th floor of a building where she definitely doesn't belong, holding food that no one wants. Are you sure?" she asks, pulling out her phone to check the address. "The app says Penthouse A, Meridian Tower, black coffee and—"
But as she's talking and gesturing with her free hand, trying to show him her phone screen, disaster strikes. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit that like button, and trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. The coffee cup, which has been growing slippery in her nervous grip, suddenly tips. It's one of those slow-motion moments where you see the disaster unfolding, but you're powerless to stop it. The plastic lid pops off, and a full 16 ounces of piping hot black coffee arcs through the air like a dark, caffeinated rainbow. It lands squarely on James's chest. The coffee soaks through his custom shirt instantly, spreading across the expensive fabric like spilled ink on paper. Steam rises from the hot liquid, and Maria watches in absolute horror as the dark stain spreads across what is probably a $500 shirt and seeps into his perfectly tailored jacket. For a moment, neither of them moves. They just stand there, frozen in the doorway of the penthouse, with the smell of coffee and the weight of what just happened hanging between them. Maria's face goes through a series of expressions in rapid succession: shock, horror, embarrassment, and then something approaching panic. Her hands fly to her mouth, and the thermal bag drops to the floor with a soft thud. "Oh my God," she whispers, and then louder, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I can't believe your suit. Oh no, oh no." James looks down at his chest, where the coffee is still dripping onto his Italian leather shoes. The silence stretches between them like a taut wire, and Maria feels her heart hammering against her ribs. This is it. This is where she gets sued, where she loses her job, where her American dream comes crashing down because of 16 ounces of coffee and her clumsy, exhausted hands. But then something unexpected happens. James starts to laugh. It's not a mean laugh or a sarcastic laugh. It's a genuine, surprised laugh that bubbles up from somewhere deep in his chest. He looks up at Maria, and his storm cloud eyes are actually twinkling with something that might be amusement. "Well," he says, pulling at his soaked shirt, "I guess I needed to change anyway." Maria stares at him like he's speaking a foreign language. This isn't the reaction she expected. She expected yelling, threats, demands for compensation she couldn't possibly afford. She didn't expect laughter. What?" she stammers. "I said I guess I needed to change anyway," James repeats, and he's still smiling. "I've been wearing this suit for 14 hours straight. The coffee might have actually done me a favor." Maria feels tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but they're not tears of relief. They're tears of confusion and overwhelming gratitude, and the kind of emotional exhaustion that comes from expecting the worst and getting kindness instead. "Sir, I'm so sorry," she says again, her voice shaking. "I can pay for the dry cleaning, or I have some money saved. I can—"
"Hey," James says, and his voice is gentler now, almost concerned. "Hey, it's okay. Really, it was an accident." But Maria can't stop apologizing. The words tumble out of her like water from a broken dam. "I've been working since 9 this morning, and I'm so tired, and I should have been more careful, and your suit probably costs more than I make in 6 months, and I don't know what I'm going to tell my boss, and—" Whoa, slow down," James says, and he takes a step closer to her. "Take a breath. It's really okay." For the first time, he really looks at her. Not just glances at her like she's part of the building's service infrastructure, but actually sees her. He sees the exhaustion in her dark eyes, the way her shoulders are curved inward, like she's trying to make herself smaller, the proud tilt of her chin, even as she's apologizing. He sees the way her hands are shaking slightly, and the small scar on her knuckle that looks like it came from a kitchen accident. He sees her humanity, her dignity, her struggle.
And Maria, through her embarrassment and panic, sees something in his expression that she didn't expect. She sees that he's actually listening to her, not just waiting for her to stop talking so he can dismiss her. There's something in his eyes that looks almost lonely. Comment below and tell us what you would have done in Maria's situation. Would you have run away or stayed to face the music? Listen, James says, and he seems to be making a decision. Why don't you come inside for a minute? Let me get you a towel or something and we can figure this out. Maria's eyes widen. Inside? Oh no, sir, I couldn't. I should just go. I'll figure out how to pay for the suit, I promise. You're not paying for anything, James says firmly. And please, stop calling me sir. I'm James. He pauses, looking down at his coffee-soaked shirt again. And you are? Maria, she says quietly. Maria Gonzalez. Well, Maria Gonzalez, I insist that you come inside. At least let me get you some water. You look like you're about to pass out. Maria wants to refuse, wants to just disappear into the elevator and pretend this never happened. But there's something in James's voice, something genuine and kind, that makes her hesitate. And honestly, she is feeling a little lightheaded. She hasn't eaten anything since her lunch break at 2 o'clock, and the shock of the coffee incident has left her shaky. I don't know if I should, she says.
Look, I promise I'm not going to call the police or sue you or anything like that, James says, and there's a hint of humor in his voice. I just think you could use a minute to sit down. And, frankly, I could use the company. That last part slips out before he can stop it, and both of them are surprised by the honesty of it. James Whitmore III, heir to a technology fortune, owner of a penthouse apartment worth more than most people see in a lifetime, has just admitted to a delivery driver that he's lonely. Maria looks at him with new eyes, and for a moment she sees past the expensive suit and the perfect apartment and the life that seems so far removed from hers. She sees a person who, maybe, isn't so different from her after all. Okay, she says quietly, just for a minute. James steps aside, and Maria walks into his world. The penthouse is exactly what you'd expect, and nothing like what she imagined at the same time. Yes, there's luxury everywhere. Marble floors that reflect the city lights, floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a breathtaking view of Manhattan, furniture that looks like it belongs in a museum. But there's also something sterile about it, something unlived in. The kitchen looks like it's never been used. There are no personal photos on the mantelpiece, no books left open on the coffee table, no signs that anyone actually lives here. It feels less like a home and more like a very expensive hotel suite. Have a seat anywhere you like, James says, gesturing toward a living room area that's bigger than Maria's entire apartment. I'm going to go change out of this coffee-soaked shirt. As he disappears into what Maria assumes is the bedroom, she remains standing near the entrance, afraid to touch anything. The silence in the apartment is profound. No traffic noise reaches this high, no neighbors arguing through thin walls, no sounds of life beyond the soft hum of air conditioning. She looks out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city spread out below them like a glittering circuit board. From up here, Manhattan looks peaceful, almost magical. She can't see the crowds or the garbage or the struggle. She can't see people like herself, hurrying between jobs, counting quarters for subway fare, choosing between groceries and rent money. The view's pretty amazing, isn't it? Maria turns to find James walking back into the room. He's changed into a simple white t-shirt and dark jeans, and somehow, dressed down like this, he looks more approachable, more human. The expensive suit had been like armor, creating distance between him and the world. Without it, he just looks like a regular person who happens to live in an extraordinary place.
It's incredible, Maria says honestly. I've never seen the city from this high up before. I moved in here 3 years ago, James says, joining her at the window. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my view every day. He pauses, looking out at the lights. Though, to be honest, I don't spend much time looking at it anymore. I guess you get used to even the most amazing things. There's something wistful in his voice that Maria doesn't expect. She glances at him sideways, noting the way the city lights play across his features, the slight sadness in his expression. That seems impossible, she says, getting used to something like this. James turns to look at her, and their eyes meet for a moment. What about you? How long have you been in New York? 2 years, Maria says. I moved here from Phoenix to chase the American dream, I guess. She laughs, but there's no bitterness in it. Turns out the dream involves a lot more food delivery and a lot less glamour than I expected. What brought you here, if you don't mind me asking? Maria hesitates for a moment. She's not used to customers, especially customers like James, asking about her life. But there's something genuine in his curiosity that makes her want to answer. My little brother, she says finally, Miguel. He's in medical school at NYU, and even with scholarships and financial aid, it's expensive. Really expensive. My parents work 3 jobs between them back in Phoenix, but it's still not enough. So I came here where I could make more money faster. James nods slowly, and Maria can see him processing this information. That's really admirable, he says, and he means it. Medical school is incredibly demanding, both financially and academically. He's going to be a pediatric surgeon, Maria says, and her voice fills with pride. He's always been the smart one in the family. Even when we were kids, he was taking apart electronics just to see how they worked, reading medical journals he found at the library. He's going to save kids' lives.
And you're making that possible, James points out. That's not nothing, Maria. That's everything. The way he says her name, with such respect and recognition, makes something flutter in Maria's chest. She's not used to being seen as anything more than the person who brings your food and disappears. But James is looking at her like she's a whole person with dreams and sacrifices and a story worth hearing. What about you? She asks, surprising herself with her boldness. What do you do? She immediately feels foolish for asking. Of course he doesn't have to work. Of course his money comes from somewhere else, some trust fund or inheritance that people like her can't even imagine. But James doesn't look offended by the question. If anything, he looks a little uncomfortable, like it's not something he particularly likes talking about. I inherited my grandfather's tech company when I turned 30, he says, Whitmore Industries. We develop software for hospitals and medical facilities. Maria's eyes widen. Wait, Whitmore Industries? The medical software company? James nods, looking slightly embarrassed. Miguel uses your software, Maria exclaims, at the hospital where he does his clinical rotations. He's always talking about how intuitive the patient management system is, how it helps doctors spend more time with patients instead of fighting with computers. For the first time since Maria walked into his apartment, James's face lights up with genuine pleasure. Really? He says. That's exactly what we were hoping for when we designed it. He says it's going to revolutionize how hospitals work, Maria continues, warming to the subject. He's actually thinking about specializing in medical informatics because of your software. James runs a hand through his hair, and Maria can see that her words have affected him deeply. I had no idea, he says quietly. I mean, I see the usage statistics and the customer satisfaction surveys, but I never really thought about the individual students and doctors who are actually using it. They stand in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing this unexpected connection.
Here's Maria, working 3 jobs to support her brother's dream of becoming a doctor. And James, whose life's work is creating tools to help doctors like Miguel do their jobs better. Their worlds, which seemed so impossibly far apart, suddenly don't feel quite so distant. If you're still with us, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to take a turn that will absolutely amaze you. "Can I ask you something?" James says suddenly. "Sure." "Earlier, when you spilled the coffee, you looked terrified. Not just embarrassed, but actually scared. Why?" Maria considers the question, wondering how honest she should be. But something about this moment, this strange evening in this impossible apartment, makes her want to tell the truth. "Because people like you can destroy people like me without even trying," she says simply. "One phone call to my boss, one bad review online, one complaint to the delivery company, and I lose my job. And if I lose this job, I can't help Miguel with school. And if Miguel can't finish school—" She shrugs, but James can see the weight she's carrying. "This job isn't just a job for me, it's everything." James feels something twist in his chest at her words. He's never thought about it that way. The power he holds, often without even realizing it, over people whose lives are more precarious than his own. He thinks about all the times he's been impatient with service workers, all the times he's left bad reviews or made complaints without considering the human consequences. "I would never do that," he says quietly. "I know that now," Maria replies, "but I didn't know that when the coffee hit your shirt. All I knew was that I'd just ruined something expensive belonging to someone important, and people like me don't usually recover from mistakes like that." The honesty of her words hangs between them, and James realizes that this conversation has become something more than just an apology for spilled coffee. This is a glimpse into a world he's never really considered, despite the fact that he's surrounded by service workers every day. Doormen, housekeepers, delivery drivers, restaurant staff. They've always been background figures in his life, polite and efficient, but not quite real. But Maria is undeniably real. Her tiredness is real. Her worry about her brother is real. Her dignity in the face of exhaustion and struggle is real. And for reasons he can't quite articulate, James finds himself wanting to know more about her world, her story, her dreams, beyond just getting through each day. "Are you hungry?" he asks suddenly. "I mean, you've been working since 9 this morning. Have you eaten?" Maria's stomach chooses that moment to growl audibly, answering the question for her. She blushes and presses a hand to her abdomen. "I had a sandwich around 2, she admits, "but I've been kind of focused on finishing my deliveries." "That's not okay," James says, and there's something almost fierce in his voice. "You can't work 12-hour days without eating." "It's not that simple," Maria says defensively. "Taking breaks costs money. Every minute I'm not delivering is money I'm not making. And buying food during my shift," she shrugs, "it adds up." James feels that twist in his chest again, sharper this time. Here he is, living in a penthouse apartment he barely appreciates, and Maria is skipping meals to save money for her brother's education. "Look, this is going to sound strange," he says, "but would you let me cook you something? I mean, I owe you dinner anyway, since you brought me food I didn't order, and then I accidentally made you spill coffee all over yourself." "You didn't make me do anything," Maria protests. "That was all me and my clumsy hands." "Would you let me cook for you anyway?" James asks, and there's something almost vulnerable in the request. Maria looks at him curiously. "Do you actually know how to cook?" James grins, and it transforms his whole face. "I know it doesn't look like it, but I actually love cooking. It's just, there's not much point in cooking elaborate meals for one person, you know?" As if to prove his point, he leads her to the kitchen, which Maria now realizes isn't as unused as she initially thought. The knife block is well stocked with high-quality blades that show signs of actual use. The spice rack is extensive and organized. The refrigerator, when James opens it, is stocked with fresh ingredients that clearly weren't ordered from a restaurant. "What do you like?" James asks, already pulling vegetables from the crisper drawer. "I make a pretty main pasta primavera, or I could do stir-fry. Oh, or if you're feeling adventurous, I make these salmon tacos that are—" "James," Maria interrupts, and he stops mid-sentence, looking at her with raised eyebrows. "Why are you doing this?"
It's a fair question, and James realizes he doesn't have a simple answer. Why is he cooking for a delivery driver he met 20 minutes ago? Why is he more interested in her stories than he's been in any conversation he's had in months? Why does the thought of her going back out into the night to finish her deliveries make him feel strangely protective? "Honestly," he says, setting down the bunch of asparagus he was holding, "I'm not sure. But this is the first real conversation I've had with someone in, God, maybe months. And you're interesting. Your life, your story, your dedication to your brother, it's all so much more meaningful than anything in my world." Maria frowns. "That can't be true. You're successful, you're helping doctors save lives with your software, I'm lonely," James says simply. "I go to work, I come home, I attend charity galas where I write checks and make small talk with people who only care about my bank account. I haven't had a genuine friendship in years. I date women who see me as a portfolio rather than a person, and most days I feel like I'm sleepwalking through my own life." The admission surprises them both. James hadn't intended to be quite so honest, but something about Maria's direct gaze and her own honesty invites the truth. "I'm sorry," Maria says softly. "That sounds really hard." "It's a privileged kind of hard," James says with a self-deprecating smile. "I know that. But it's still hard." They look at each other for a moment, and Maria feels something shift between them. This isn't about customer service anymore, or even about the spilled coffee. This is about two people who have somehow found themselves in an unexpected moment of genuine human connection. "Okay," she says, "pasta primavera sounds amazing." James's face breaks into a smile that reaches all the way to his storm cloud eyes. "Great," he says, "but you have to let me teach you. I'm not cooking for you, I'm cooking with you." And so, in the pristine kitchen of a $50 million penthouse apartment, a technology heir and a food delivery driver begin chopping vegetables together. James shows Maria how to julienne the bell peppers, and she teaches him the technique her grandmother used for getting garlic to release its oils. They work side by side, their sleeves rolled up, talking and laughing as the pasta water comes to a boil. Let us know in the comments what you think is going to happen next. Are you Team Maria or Team James? As they cook, their conversation flows naturally from topic to topic. Maria tells James about her childhood in Phoenix, about her parents who immigrated from Mexico with nothing but hope and determination, about the small house where she shared a bedroom with her 3 siblings but never felt crowded because it was filled with love. James tells Maria about boarding school and summers at the family compound in Martha's Vineyard, but also about the pressure he felt to live up to his grandfather's legacy, about choosing to study business instead of the art history he was passionate about the way wealth can sometimes feel like a prison with golden bars. "Do you ever think about doing something else?" Maria asks as she stirs the pasta. "I mean, something just for you?" James considers the question while he sautés the vegetables. The kitchen smells incredible, garlic and herbs, and the promise of a good meal shared with someone who actually wants to hear his answer.
I used to paint, he says quietly. In college, before I had to come back and take over the company, I was actually pretty good at it. My professor said I had potential. What happened to your paintings? They're in storage somewhere, James says, and Maria can hear the regret in his voice. My grandfather died suddenly, and there was no time for art anymore. There was just responsibility. Maria watches him as he cooks, noting the careful precision of his movements, the way his face relaxes when he's focused on the task at hand. She's beginning to understand that James's life, for all its privilege and luxury, has been as constrained in its own way as hers has been by necessity. It's not too late, she says, to start painting again, I mean. James looks up from the pan, and their eyes meet across the kitchen island. Maybe not, he says. The pasta is ready, and they plate it together. 2 servings of beautiful restaurant-quality pasta primavera that they made with their own hands. James pours 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that probably costs more than Maria makes in a week. But somehow, in this moment, the disparity doesn't feel important. They eat at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining table, sitting on bar stools with their elbows on the counter like old friends. The food is delicious, but more than that, the conversation continues to flow naturally. Maria finds herself laughing at James's stories about disastrous board meetings and pretentious art gallery openings. James finds himself captivated by Maria's descriptions of the characters she meets on her delivery routes. The lonely old man who always tips an exact change and asks her to stay for just a minute of conversation. The young mother who apologizes for her crying baby and always offers Maria a bottle of water. The teenager who saves up his allowance to order pizza once a week and treats it like a celebration. You really see people, James observes as Maria finishes a story about a customer who was clearly going through a divorce but tried to hide it behind forced cheerfulness. I mean, you really notice them and care about them. Don't you? Maria asks, genuinely curious. James thinks about it. I think I used to, he says slowly, but somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing individuals and started seeing, I don't know, functions. The doorman, the housekeeper, the driver. Even at work, I see employees and shareholders and customers, but not really people. That sounds exhausting, Maria says. It is, James admits, and it's lonely, really, really lonely. They finish their meal in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city continues its eternal dance of lights and movement. But inside the penthouse, time feels suspended. Finally, Maria glances at her phone and gasps. "Oh no," she says, "it's almost midnight. I was supposed to finish my deliveries hours ago." Reality crashes back like a cold wave. Maria remembers who she is, where she is, and all the reasons why this evening can't continue indefinitely. She has to get back to work, back to her real life of rent payments and grocery bills and the constant hustle to make ends meet. "I should go," she says, standing up from the bar stool. "My boss is probably wondering where I am." But James doesn't want her to leave. Not yet. He can't remember the last time he felt this connected to another human being, this interested in someone else's thoughts and dreams. The prospect of returning to his empty apartment, to his routine of solitary meals and meaningless social obligations, feels suddenly unbearable. "What if I called your boss?" he says impulsively, explained what happened, told him it was my fault you were delayed. Maria looks at him like he's suggested flying to the moon. "James, you can't just... You don't understand how jobs like mine work." "Then help me understand," he says earnestly. "What can I do?" Maria feels her heart do something complicated in her chest. The fact that he wants to help, that he's thinking about her problems and trying to solve them, is both touching and heartbreaking. because at the end of the day, they live in different worlds, and his good intentions can't change that. Nothing, she says gently. You can't do anything, and that's okay. This has been... She struggles to find words for what this evening has been. This has been the most interesting night I've had since I moved to New York. But it can't be more than that. James feels something sharp and painful lodge in his chest at her words. He knows she's right, but that doesn't make it easier to accept. Can I at least call you a cab? He asks. Or better yet, let me drive you. I have a car. James, Maria says, and there's something final in her voice. Thank you for everything. For not being angry about the coffee, for dinner, for seeing me, really seeing me. But I need to get back to my life now. She walks toward the door, and James follows her like he's being pulled by an invisible string. At the entrance to the penthouse, she turns to face him one last time. Take care of yourself, she says, and maybe think about painting again? Before James can respond, before he can find the words to ask her to stay or at least give him her number, Maria disappears into the elevator. The doors close between them with a soft ding, and James is left standing alone in his doorway, staring at the spot where she was just standing.
The apartment feels different now. Not just empty, but hollowed out, as if Maria had taken something essential with her when she left. James walks back through the rooms that suddenly feel too big, too quiet, too removed from the real world where people work 3 jobs to support their dreams and know the names of their regular customers and find joy in small moments of human connection. He stands at the window where they looked out at the city together, but the view doesn't look the same anymore. Now he can see past the glittering lights to imagine the lives being lived behind them. People like Maria, working late shifts and making sacrifices for the people they love, finding dignity and purpose in struggle, building meaningful lives without penthouses or trust funds or custom-tailored suits. For the first time in years, James Whitmore III feels truly awake. But this story isn't over yet, not by a long shot. 3 days pass. 3 days during which James goes through the motions of his regular life. Board meetings, conference calls, a charity luncheon for the Children's Hospital where he writes a check for $50,000 and smiles for the cameras. But his mind keeps returning to Maria, to their conversation, to the way she looked when she talked about her brother's dreams and her own sacrifices to make them come through. On Saturday morning, James does something he hasn't done in years. He goes to an art supply store in Soho and buys canvases, brushes, and paints. The elderly store owner, a woman with paint-stained fingers and eyes that twinkle with artistic passion, helps him select colors and explains the differences between various types of brushes. For the first time in months, James feels genuinely excited about something. But even as he sets up an easel in his apartment's spare room and loses himself in the familiar rhythm of mixing colors and making marks on canvas, he can't stop thinking about Maria. He wonders if she's working today, if she's had enough to eat, if she's still taking care of everyone else while neglecting herself. By Sunday evening, he can't take it anymore. He knows it's probably stupid, maybe even inappropriate, but he can't shake the feeling that their meeting was more than just coincidence. He decides to order food from Romano's, the restaurant where Maria had picked up his supposed delivery. When the delivery arrives, it's not Maria. It's a young man with tired eyes and a slight limp who looks like he's been on his feet all day. James feels disappointed, but not deterred. "Hey," he says to the delivery driver, "can I ask you something? Do you know a driver named Maria Gonzalez? She works for Quick Bite Delivery. The young man, his name tag says Kevin, brightens immediately. Maria? Yeah, everyone knows Maria. She's like the big sister of all the delivery drivers in this area. She looks out for everyone, shares tips when someone's having a bad day, always willing to cover a shift if someone gets sick. Is she working tonight? James asks, trying to sound casual. Nah, she finally took a day off. Girl works herself to death usually, but I heard she called in sick today, which is weird because Maria never gets sick, and she definitely never misses work. James feels a pang of concern. She called in sick? Yeah, but between you and me, Kevin lowers his voice conspiratorially, I think she's just exhausted. She's been pushing herself too hard for too long. We've all been telling her she needs to slow down, but she won't listen. After Kevin leaves, James paces his apartment, feeling increasingly agitated. He knows he barely knows Maria, knows he has no right to be concerned about her well-being. But he can't shake the image of her exhausted eyes, the way she mentioned skipping meals to save money, the weight of responsibility she carries for her brother's future. Monday morning, James makes a decision that surprises even him. Instead of going to his office, he drives to the Quick Bite Delivery headquarters, a small, cramped office in Queens above a Chinese restaurant. The manager, a middle-aged man named Tony with a Brooklyn accent and suspicious eyes, looks James up and down like he's trying to figure out if he's a customer, a cop, or something else entirely. I'm looking for Maria Gonzalez, James says. I wanted to make sure she's okay. Tony's expression shifts from suspicion to protectiveness. Who's asking? My name is James Whitmore. Maria delivered food to my apartment last week, and I heard she called in sick. I was concerned. Maria doesn't get sick, Tony says firmly, and she definitely doesn't miss work unless something's really wrong. He studies James more carefully. You're the guy from the penthouse, aren't you? She mentioned spilling coffee on some rich customer. James feels heat rise in his cheeks. She told you about that? She tells me about everything. Been worried sick about getting fired over it. Tony's eyes narrow. You here to make trouble for her? No, James says quickly. The opposite, actually. Look, I know this might sound strange, but could you give me her address? I just want to check on her. Tony laughs, but there's no humor in it. Buddy, I don't care if you live in a penthouse or a cardboard box. I don't give out my driver's personal information to strangers. I understand, James says, but I'm worried about her, really worried. Something in James's voice must convince Tony that his concern is genuine, because the older man's expression softens slightly. Tell you what, Tony says, I'll check on her myself. If she needs help, I'll let you know. Fair enough? It's not what James wanted, but it's better than nothing. He leaves his business card with Tony and drives back to Manhattan, feeling frustrated and helpless. That afternoon, Tony calls. She's sick, he says without preamble. Real sick. Fever, chills, the works. Says she's been fighting it for days, but kept working anyway. Stubborn girl. Is she okay? Does she need a doctor? The questions tumble out of James before he can stop them. She says she's fine, just needs rest. But her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, she's keeping an eye on her. Says Maria's been pushing herself too hard for too long, and her body finally said enough. James feels that familiar twist of concern in his chest. Is there anything I can do? Tony is quiet for a moment. Why do you care so much about a delivery driver you met once? It's a fair question, and James finds himself giving the same honest answer he gave Maria that night in his kitchen. Because she's the first real person I've talked to in years, he says, and because she's working herself to death to help her brother achieve his dreams, and someone should care about her dreams too.
Another pause. Then Tony sighs. She lives in Astoria, 4215 31st Avenue, apartment 4B. But I swear, if you do anything to upset her while she's sick, I'll make you regret it.
James gets Maria's address and immediately drives to Astoria, stopping first at a pharmacy to buy fever reducers, throat lozenges, and electrolyte drinks. Then he stops at a grocery store and buys ingredients for the chicken soup his grandmother used to make when he was sick as a child. The one recipe he remembers by heart because it was the only time she ever cooked for him personally. The building where Maria lives is a 4-story walk-up with faded brick and a front door that doesn't quite close properly. The hallway smells like a dozen different types of cooking and echoes with the sounds of families living their lives, children laughing, televisions playing, couples having conversations in Spanish and English and languages James doesn't recognize. He climbs to the 4th floor, his arms full of grocery bags and medicine, and knocks softly on the door marked 4B. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I told you I'm fine," comes Maria's voice from inside, hoarse and tired. "It's not Mrs. Rodriguez," James says. "It's James, from Thursday night." There's a long silence, then the sound of locks being turned. The door opens just a crack, and Maria's eye appears in the gap. She looks terrible. Her face is flushed with fever, her hair is a mess, and she's wearing an oversized sweater that makes her look even smaller than usual. "James," she says, and her voice is barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Tony told me you were sick," he says simply. "I brought soup." Maria stares at him through the crack in the door like she's not sure he's real. "You brought soup?" "I made soup," James corrects. "Well, I bought the ingredients to make soup. I thought maybe you could use some taken care of for once." For a moment, Maria doesn't respond. Then, to James's alarm, he sees tears start to well up in her eyes. "Hey," he says gently, "are you okay? Should I call a doctor?" "No, it's not that," Maria says, wiping at her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. "It's just, no one's ever made me soup before." The simple honesty of her statement breaks something open in James's chest. Here's this incredible woman who spends her life taking care of everyone else, working multiple jobs to support her brother's education, looking out for her fellow delivery drivers, worrying about customers she's never met, and no one's ever made her soup when she's sick. "Well," he says, "there's a first time for everything." Maria hesitates for another moment, then opens the door wider. "I look terrible," she warns. "You look sick," James says matter-of-factly, "which is what you are. Now, are you going to let me make you some soup, or are we going to have this entire conversation in your doorway?" Despite her fever and exhaustion, Maria finds herself smiling. She steps aside and lets James into her apartment. If James's penthouse was striking for its luxury and emptiness, Maria's apartment is striking for exactly the opposite reasons. It's tiny, probably smaller than his bedroom, but every inch of it is filled with life and personality. There are photos everywhere. Maria with her family in Phoenix, her brother Miguel in his medical school graduation gown, her parents at their anniversary party, friends from work celebrating birthdays and holidays. The furniture is obviously secondhand, but it's clean and well-maintained and arranged with care. There are plants on the windowsill, small succulents and herbs that somehow thrive despite the limited light. The kitchen is barely big enough for one person, but it's organized and stocked with spices and ingredients that speak to someone who actually cooks for herself. Most importantly, the apartment feels like home. It feels lived in and loved and full of the kind of warmth that has nothing to do with expensive heating systems and everything to do with the person who lives there. "This is wonderful," James says, and he means it. "It's tiny," Maria says, self-conscious. "It's perfect," James insists. "It feels like you." Maria looks at him with surprise, then points to the small couch.
"Sit," she orders. "You're making me nervous standing there with all those bags." James sets the groceries on her small kitchen counter and starts unpacking ingredients. Maria watches from the couch, wrapped in a blanket that looks like it was knitted by someone who loved her. "You really don't have to do this," she says, as James begins chopping vegetables, with the same precise movements she remembers from Thursday night. "I want to," James says simply. "When's the last time you let someone take care of you?" Maria thinks about it, and the answer surprises her. "I honestly can't remember." James pauses in his chopping and looks at her. "That's not okay, Maria." "It's just how it is," she says with a shrug that turns into a cough. "It doesn't have to be." As James cooks, filling Maria's small apartment with the smell of simmering chicken and vegetables, they talk in the easy, natural way they did that first night. Maria, despite her fever, finds herself sharing stories she's never told anyone. About the loneliness of being the family member who moved away, about the pressure of knowing that Miguel's future depends on her success, about the dreams she's put on hold to make his possible. James tells her about the painting he started over the weekend, about how holding a brush again felt like coming back to himself after years of sleepwalking. He tells her about the board meeting he skipped that morning, about how he's starting to question everything about the life he's built or inherited. "You skipped a board meeting to bring me soup?" Maria asks, her voice filled with disbelief. "Best decision I've made in years," James says, ladling soup into one of her mismatched bowls. The soup is perfect, rich and comforting, and exactly what Maria's sick body needs. But more than the food, it's the act of care that overwhelms her. Someone saw that she was struggling and decided to help. Someone thought she was worth the effort of shopping and cooking and driving across the city. "This is incredible," she says between spoonfuls. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother," James says. "She was the only person in my family who ever really took care of me when I was sick. My parents were always traveling or working, but Grandma Rose would drop everything to make soup and sit with me until I felt better." "She sounds wonderful." She was. She died when I was 15, and I stopped letting myself need taking care of after that. Maria looks at him with new understanding. "Is that why you're here? Because you remember what it felt like to need someone?" "Maybe," James admits. "Or maybe I'm here because I need to take care of someone for once, instead of just writing checks and calling it caring." They eat in comfortable silence, and gradually Maria feels the warmth of the soup and the medicine James brought starting to work. Her fever breaks, and for the first time in days, she doesn't feel like she's struggling just to keep her eyes open. "Better?" James asks, noting the change in her color and posture. "Much," Maria says. "Thank you, really. You're welcome." They look at each other across her tiny living room, and something passes between them, an acknowledgement of care given and received, of walls carefully lowered, of the strange and wonderful way two people from completely different worlds can find common ground in simple human kindness. "James," Maria says quietly, "what are we doing?" It's the question that's been hovering between them since that first night, the question neither of them has been brave enough to ask directly. "I don't know," James says honestly, "but I know I haven't felt this much like myself in years." "We're very different people," Maria points out. "We live very different lives." "We are," James agrees, "but maybe that's not as important as I thought it was." Hit that like button if you think James is falling for Maria, or if you think this connection could actually work despite their differences. Maria studies his face, looking for signs of the kind of casual interest wealthy men sometimes show in women they see as novelties or distractions. But what she sees in James's expression is something else entirely. Genuine affection, respect, and a kind of wonder that suggests he's as surprised by their connection as she is. "I have to get better and go back to work," she says finally, "and you have to go back to your life, your real life." "What if I don't want to?" James asks. The question hangs in the air between them, loaded with possibilities and complications, and the weight of two people standing at a crossroads they never expected to reach. Before Maria can answer, there's a knock at her door. "Mija, are you feeling better? I brought more tea." "That's Mrs. Rodriguez," Maria explains, getting up to answer the door. "My neighbor. She's been checking on me." Maria opens the door to reveal a small, elderly woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Mrs. Rodriguez takes one look at James, clearly not Maria's usual type of visitor, and raises her eyebrows with interest. "Oh," she says, "I didn't know you had company." "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is James. James, this is Mrs. Rodriguez. She's been taking care of me since I moved in."
Mrs. Rodriguez studies James with the sharp eyes of someone who spent decades learning to read people. She notes his expensive clothes, his carefully styled hair, the way he stands with the unconscious confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. But she also notes the way he looks at Maria with genuine warmth and concern, and the fact that her kitchen smells like homemade soup. "You made her food," Mrs. Rodriguez observes. "Yes, ma'am," James says politely. "Good," she says with a firm nod. "This girl never lets anyone take care of her, always taking care of everyone else." She looks back and forth between them, and a small smile plays at the corners of her mouth. "You're the coffee boy." "The what?" James asks, confused. "Maria told me about spilling coffee on some nice man who didn't get angry," Mrs. Rodriguez explains. "She's been talking about it all week. He was so kind, Mrs. Rodriguez. He could have yelled, but he didn't. He made me dinner instead." "So you're the coffee boy." James glances at Maria, who looks mortified. "You've been talking about me?" "Not talking about you," Maria says quickly, "just mentioning the incident." "Every day," Mrs. Rodriguez adds helpfully. "Coffee boy this, coffee boy that. I was starting to think you were imaginary." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Maria protests, but she's smiling despite her embarrassment. The older woman laughs and presses a thermos of tea into Maria's hands. "I'll leave you two alone," she says with a meaningful look. "But James, you make sure she rests and eats and stops trying to take care of the whole world when she should be taking care of herself." "I will," James promises, and something in his voice makes Mrs. Rodriguez nod approvingly. After she leaves, Maria and James look at each other with a mix of amusement and embarrassment. "Coffee boy?" James asks. "I had to call you something," Maria says defensively. "I didn't know your last name." "And you've been talking about me every day?" Maria feels heat rise in her cheeks. "Maybe." "Good," James says, and his smile is warm and genuine. "Because I've been thinking about you every day, too." The admission hangs between them, honest and vulnerable, and full of the kind of possibility that makes hearts race and hands shake. "James, I need you to be honest with me about something. Anything."
Is this real? What's happening between us? Or am I just... She struggles to find the words. Am I just something different for you? Something exotic or interesting that you'll get bored with when the novelty wears off? James feels the question like a physical blow. The fact that she even has to ask, that her experience has taught her to expect that kind of casual dismissal, makes him angry. Not at her, but at every person who's ever made her feel like she wasn't worth genuine care and attention. "Maria," he says, moving to sit beside her on the couch, "look at me." She does, and he takes her hands in his.
I have dated women who went to the same prep schools I did, who summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen, who can trace their family trees back to the Mayflower. And do you know what? I felt absolutely nothing for any of them. Nothing real, anyway. He pauses, looking into her dark eyes with an intensity that makes her breath catch. But you, he continues, you made me remember what it feels like to be alive, to care about someone else's dreams as much as my own, to want to be a better person than I was yesterday. James, I'm not done, he says gently. You asked me to be honest, so I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know where this goes. I don't know how we navigate the differences between our lives. But I do know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. And if you're willing to try, I want to figure it out together. Maria stares at him, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. This is everything she hoped he might say, and everything she's afraid to believe. What if it doesn't work? She asks. What if we try and it turns out we're too different after all? Then we'll have tried, James says simply, and we'll have given each other something beautiful, even if it doesn't last forever. Maria looks down at their joined hands, his soft and manicured, hers calloused from work but strong. They're different hands, from different worlds, but somehow they fit together perfectly. Okay, she says quietly. Okay, let's try. James feels something bright and warm explode in his chest. He lifts their joined hands to his lips and kisses her knuckles gently. Thank you, he whispers. For what? For being brave enough to let me try to deserve you. And there, in Maria's tiny apartment in Astoria, surrounded by photos of the people she loves and the smell of homemade soup, two people from different worlds decide to build a bridge between them. The next few weeks unfold like a dream that neither of them wants to wake up from. James rearranges his schedule so he can spend time with Maria between her shifts. They meet for coffee in Queen's Diners, where the waitresses know Maria by name and eye James with friendly suspicion until they see how he looks at her. They take walks through Astoria Park, where Maria shows him the playground where she brings her neighbors' children sometimes, and James shows her how to skip stones on the East River. James starts painting again, setting up his easel in Maria's apartment sometimes so they can be together while she rests between jobs. Maria poses for him, not formally, just living her life while he captures the way light falls across her face when she's reading, the graceful movements of her hands when she's cooking, the peaceful expression she wears when she's finally allowing herself to relax. They cook together in both of their kitchens, and James learns that Maria's tiny space feels more like home than his penthouse ever has. Maria learns that James is different when he's painting, more focused, more peaceful, more himself than when he's wearing his business suits and attending board meetings. You should quit, Maria tells him one evening as she watches him work on a canvas that captures the view from her fire escape. Not the glittering lights of Manhattan that everyone photographs, but the intimate details of her neighborhood, laundry hanging on lines, children playing in the street, the warm light spilling from apartment windows where families are sharing dinner. I can't just quit, James says, but there's less conviction in his voice than there would have been a month ago. Why not? You have enough money. You could paint full-time, maybe teach art classes, maybe start a program for kids who can't afford art supplies. James pauses in his painting to look at her. Is that what you would do? I don't know, Maria says honestly. I've never had the luxury of choosing what I want to do versus what I need to do. But if I did, yeah, I think I'd choose something that made me feel the way you look when you're painting. How do I look when I'm painting? Like yourself, Maria says simply. Like the person you're supposed to be. It's conversations like this that make James realize Maria sees him more clearly than anyone ever has, including himself. She doesn't see his money or his social status or his family name. She sees his potential, his dreams, his authentic self buried under years of expectations and responsibilities. And James sees Maria just as clearly. He sees her strength and her intelligence and her capacity for love that extends far beyond her own family to encompass everyone whose life she touches, however briefly. He sees the dreams she's deferred for Miguel's sake, and he starts to understand that loving someone sometimes means helping them remember their own worth. "What did you want to be?" he asks her one night as they're lying on her couch, her head on his shoulder, both of them drowsy and content. "Before Miguel needed help with medical school, before you moved to New York, what was your dream?" Maria is quiet for so long that James thinks she might have fallen asleep. Then she says, "I wanted to be a teacher." "What kind of teacher?" "Elementary school. I wanted to work with kids from families like mine, immigrants, kids whose parents work 3 jobs and don't speak perfect English, but love their children fiercely and want them to have opportunities they never had." James can picture it perfectly. Maria in a classroom, patient and encouraging, helping children discover their own potential while never making them feel ashamed of where they come from. "You still could," he says quietly. "James, I'm 24 years old with no college degree and 3 jobs. I can't afford to go back to school, and even if I could, Miguel needs—" "What if Miguel didn't need your help anymore?" James asks carefully. Maria lifts her head to look at him. "What do you mean?" James has been thinking about this for weeks, trying to figure out a way to help that doesn't feel like charity or pity. What if someone established a scholarship fund specifically for students like Miguel, students from immigrant families who are pursuing medical careers? "James, no," Maria says, sitting up completely. "You cannot pay for my brother's education." "Not me personally," James says quickly, "but what if Whitmore Industries established a scholarship program? What if we partnered with medical schools to identify promising students who need financial support? It would be a legitimate business expense. We work with hospitals, after all. It makes sense to invest in training the next generation of doctors." Maria stares at him, her mind racing. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I've been thinking about this for weeks. We could start with a small program, maybe 5 scholarships a year, and grow from there. Miguel would just be one recipient among many." "But you'd be doing it for me." "I'd be doing it because it's right," James says honestly. "Because students like your brother shouldn't have to choose between their dreams and their family's financial stability. Because you shouldn't have to sacrifice your education so he can get his." Maria feels tears starting to build behind her eyes. The idea is too big, too generous, too much like a dream she never dared to dream. "I can't let you do that," she whispers. "You're not letting me do anything," James says gently. "I'm choosing to do it. For Miguel, for other students like him, and yes, for you. Because I love you." The words slip out before James can stop them, and they both freeze. It's the first time either of them has said it, though the feeling has been growing between them for weeks. "You love me?" Maria asks, her voice barely audible. James takes her hands, just like he did that day she was sick. "I love you," he says clearly. "I love your strength and your kindness and your loyalty to your family. I love the way you see the world and the way you make me see myself. I love that you've never once asked me for anything, even though I want to give you everything." Maria feels the tears spill over, but they're good tears, happy tears, tears of a heart that's finally allowing itself to believe in something beautiful. "I love you too," she whispers, "but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this being too good to be true, of waking up and finding out it's all been a dream."
James leans forward and kisses her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips, soft and gentle and full of promise. "It's not a dream," he murmurs against her mouth. "It's real. We are real."
And in that moment, in Maria's tiny apartment with its second-hand furniture and photos of people she loves, surrounded by the paintings James has created of their life together, they both believe it completely. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in unexpected connections. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in humanity. The scholarship program launches 6 months later. The announcement makes the business news. Tech Air establishes Medical Education Fund. But the real story happens in smaller, more personal moments. Like when Maria calls Miguel to tell him he's been selected as one of the first recipients, and he cries with relief and gratitude on the phone. Like when James meets Miguel for the first time and sees Maria's eyes in her brother's face, her determination in his handshake, her dreams made manifest in his commitment to healing children. Maria enrolls in community college that fall, taking education courses while continuing to work part-time for Quick Bite Delivery. She insists on keeping the job, at least for now, because she loves the connections she's made with her regular customers, and because she's not ready to completely leave behind the work that brought her to James in the first place. James gradually transitions away from the day-to-day operations of Whitmore Industries, hiring a CEO to handle the business side while he focuses on the charitable initiatives and his art. His first gallery showing, Paintings of New York as Seen Through Maria's Eyes, sells out in 2 hours, with all proceeds going to support immigrant families pursuing higher education. But perhaps the most significant change is the one that happens in their daily life together. James splits his time between the penthouse and Maria's apartment in Astoria, and they discover that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about James learning to make coffee the way Maria likes it, about Maria teaching him to play dominoes with Mrs. Rodriguez on Sunday afternoons, about building a life that honors both of their worlds without requiring either of them to abandon who they are.
1 year after the night they met, James plans to propose. He buys a ring, not the biggest or most expensive he could afford, but one that reflects Maria's style, elegant, meaningful, beautiful without being ostentatious. He plans to ask her at the place where they first cooked together, in his penthouse kitchen, over pasta primavera made from the same recipe they shared that very first night. But Maria, as she's always done, surprises him. On a Thursday evening in October, exactly 1 year after she spilled coffee on his suit, she shows up at his penthouse with a delivery bag and a cup of coffee. "I didn't order anything," James says, echoing his words from that first night, but he's smiling. "I know," Maria says, echoing her own response, "but I brought you something anyway." She hands him the coffee cup, and James realizes it's not coffee at all. It's hot chocolate, made the way his grandmother used to make it, with real chocolate and a touch of cinnamon. "What's the occasion?" he asks. "1 year ago today, I spilled coffee on the most important person in my life," Maria says. "I thought we should commemorate the anniversary." James sets down the hot chocolate and pulls Maria into his arms. "Best accident that ever happened to me." "Me too," she says. And then, before he can reach for the ring box hidden in his jacket pocket, she pulls out a small velvet box of her own. "Maria," James says, staring at the box in shock, "what are you doing?" "Something crazy," she says, her voice shaking with nerves and excitement. "Something I never thought I'd be brave enough to do." She drops to one knee, right there in his kitchen, in the same spot where they made their first meal together, and opens the box to reveal a simple silver band. "James Alexander Whitmore III," she says, and her voice grows stronger with each word. "You taught me that love isn't about what we have or where we come from. It's about who we choose to be together."
You've supported my dreams, loved my family, and shown me that home isn't a place, it's a person. James feels tears starting to slide down his cheeks as Maria continues. I know I don't have much to offer you, except my heart and my promise to love you exactly as you are, while challenging you to be the best version of yourself. So, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget how extraordinary you are? For a moment, James is too overwhelmed to speak. Then he reaches into his jacket and pulls out his own ring box, dropping to his knees beside her on the kitchen floor. Only if you'll marry me too, he says, opening his box to reveal the ring he chose for her. Because I was about to ask you the exact same question. They're both laughing and crying now, kneeling on the marble floor of a penthouse kitchen, holding ring boxes and promises and the future they're going to build together. Is that a yes? Maria asks. That's a yes, James confirms. 1,000 times yes. They slide the rings onto each other's fingers with shaking hands and tear-streaked faces, and then they're kissing and holding each other and marveling at the beautiful impossibility of their love story. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York City glitters and pulses with the dreams and struggles of millions of people. Somewhere in those lights, there are other delivery drivers working late shifts, other lonely people in expensive apartments, other moments of unexpected connection waiting to transform lives. But inside the penthouse, there are just two people who spilled coffee on fate and found out it tastes like forever. 3 years later, they have a small wedding in Astoria Park, surrounded by Maria's family from Phoenix, James's friends from the art world, delivery drivers from Quick Bite, and neighbors from both their worlds. Mrs. Rodriguez cries during the ceremony. Miguel, now in his surgical residency, gives a toast about the power of love to change not just 2 lives, but countless others through their example of service and generosity. Tony from Quick Bite Delivery catches the bouquet, which makes everyone laugh and reminds them all that love comes when you least expect it, in the most ordinary moments that turn out to be extraordinary. Maria finishes her teaching degree and starts working at an elementary school in Queens, where she loves her students fiercely and helps them believe in their own potential. James continues to paint and run the scholarship program, which has grown to support over 100 students annually. They split their time between the penthouse and a house they bought in Astoria, close enough to Mrs. Rodriguez for Sunday domino games, but big enough for the family they're planning to start. And sometimes, on Thursday nights, they order delivery food they don't really want and tip generously. And remember that the most beautiful love stories begin with the smallest accidents. A spilled cup of coffee, a moment of unexpected kindness, and 2 people brave enough to see past the surface to the heart of what really matters. Because love, like coffee, is better when it's shared. And sometimes the best things in life happen when you least expect them, in the space between an apology and forgiveness, in the choice to see someone else's humanity instead of their differences, in the decision to catch someone when they're falling instead of letting them hit the ground. This is their story. This is how a delivery driver and a millionaire proved that love doesn't care about bank accounts or zip codes or the distance between worlds. It only cares about 2 hearts willing to be open, 2 minds willing to be changed, and 2 people brave enough to spill a little coffee on the perfectly ordered life they thought they wanted in order to find the perfectly imperfect love they never knew they needed. The end. Thanks for staying with us through this incredible journey.
If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that love can happen anywhere, anytime, to anyone brave enough to believe in it. And make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we have more amazing true stories coming your way that will restore your faith in the beautiful unpredictability of human connection. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your coffee cups steady. You never know when one small accident might change your entire life.